So what motivates me to get out of bed? What motivates me to get into training when, we all have those days where we just don't feel it. We don't feel good. We don't want to do something hard or physical. And the biggest thing that I used to tell myself that I can tell you, the biggest thing that motivated me was so a lot of times I get asked, what motivates me? What motivated me to go to the gym? What motivates me to be super strong? What motivates me to eat cleaner? What motivates me to help other people? Well, the interesting thing about all that is that I think I started off by losing my dad. So when I started to kind of get into lifting at 11 years old, and my uncle was really physically fit. And that physical fitness, when I started to train with him, he started to recognize that I was kind of strong because I was swimming the whole time, and I was a bigger kid. But then once my dad passed away at about 13, what I started to notice was that the gym kind of set me along the path to finding a father figure. And I didn't know that at the time. I thought, I just something to pass the time. I've always been one of those people in motivation that I wanted the most I could get out of every day. And I think some of that started from watching my dad pass away young, then watching my uncle pass away very young, I was both very close with, both of them. And I started to realize that we were always only here, and we don't know how long we're going to be here. So for me, it's always putting in the 100% every day. And I noticed as a kid that if I worked out hard, that I noticed it the next day. It was almost like I got smarter. I built up a bank account. It was like one of those things you could residually see the change, like from day to day, maybe not day to day, but like week to week and month to month. And then by the time I was like a sophomore or a junior in high school, I was one of the strongest kids in the state. And it was just because I was willing to put the work in every day after school. So I started to notice that everything that I was going to have to do took time. And the thing that really motivated me to go to the gym was that I was willing to donate the time. And I noticed that, there were always other kids that could be stronger than me and better than me at stuff, but I was willing to outlast them. I was willing to outwork them. And that always motivated me to go and find smarter ways to train so I could stay in the game longer. Because as we know, you're always going to have that kid that's never touched a weight and then comes in and can deadlift like crazy or bench like crazy, and you're just like, man, for me, I wanted to outlast everyone to get better. And I knew that I was going to have to work really, really hard. So even though I would consider myself genetically gifted compared to other people, maybe just normal people, I had to work really, really hard to get up into the world rankings. And the reason I was able to work or get there is because I was willing to put the time in. So you figure if I started lifting pretty seriously at 11, 12 years old, I didn't get up to the top in the world until I was nearly 30. But I love the process, and that was what made it so fun for me, is that I was willing to go through the process of things. So the motivation came from that I was willing to do stuff longer than other people weren't willing to do. And every step of the way I've ran into people that had more gifts than I did, or were more genetically inclined than I was, but I had the internal motivation that I loved to train. And where that love for training came from was probably starting very young, where it was just ingrained into me, and then I got the endorphins rush. I didn't know what that was, the dopamine responses. I had no idea what any of that stuff was. All I know is that I felt better when I felt like I accomplished something physically. And that was always a huge motivation, but it started so young that I never wanted to let that go. And so my motivation came from loving to train. It wasn't loving to be better than anyone else. It wasn't loving to win championships and be in magazines or on TVs. It was loving to be able to go to the gym and feel like that I was putting a building block on top of another building block every day, to the point that I built something that would be very, very hard for another person to achieve. But a lot of that was just motivating me internally to just put my head down, block out external distractions, and then just train. And that led me to not only being motivated to be a good lifter, but motivated to be good in school, motivated me to try to be one of the top guys in my profession, and just motivate other people in order for them to get better. So the big thing is I think motivation's contagious. That's why I can find it very complex sometimes to train people that I find are very low motivation, which is quite a lot of people in society. Motivation, has to come from inside first. If you're waiting for a trainer, or you're waiting for a friend, or you're waiting for a relative to give you the motivation to get better, it's very hard to sustain. And I think when the motivation becomes internal is when the sustainability of whatever you're doing becomes so much long term, because you're not looking for external factors to increase your motivation. Your motivation comes from within inside. So that's why I find it very interesting. Like, for instance, there was a paper that just came out about training in linear periodization versus training in conjugate for muscle mass, or rotating means, and they found that the people that rotated the means ended up having a higher retention rate to the training, and that to me meant everything, right? So the point is, if you can retain something longer, you're going to be better. And I think that is what the biggest motivation is for me now in the style in which that I train and try to show you guys, is that with rotating the types of exercises that you're doing all the time, you fight and resist burnout, you increase intrinsic motivation, and then your body becomes better by default. I think only basing your motivation off of, I want to look like Matt, or I want to have, a big bench press like Matt, or I want to be a world record holder like Matt. The thing of it is that just be better every day and find out where that makes you. That will motivate you beyond all belief, because all I ever did with my motivation was just try to be better than I was yesterday. And eventually that made me better than everybody else. But if I was comparing myself to everybody else when I started as a kid, I probably would have burned out before I even left high school. But the thing was, the motivation was to make Matt better than Matt from freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, and all through college. And then maybe when I got up into the pro ranks, I started to compare myself to other people. But the intrinsic motivation was already there. So I think making yourself motivated, being a motivated person to train and to eat clean and to live healthier and to be stronger, the motivation has to come from inside. And if the motivation is intrinsic versus looking at extrinsic things, and I think that's the biggest problem with our exercise culture, what you start to find is that we're all sold on extrinsic motivation. What do we train for? What is the average person? If you were to go to Lifetime Fitness or LA Fitness or any of these big box gyms, and you were to sit down and give everybody a questionnaire on why they train, I'm guarantee you they're training to look better, they're training to gain attention, they're training for something extrinsic. And that is why you see such a drop off with physical capability, physical type stuff, because all of the attention's outside, it's not inside. So I think whatever you can do to increase intrinsic motivation is going to be huge, not only in your training, but in life, because at the end of the day, you should be comparing yourself to you. There's not another one of you. You're unique. Your motivation should be to increase your uniqueness, not to blend in with other people or compare yourself to other people. So what motivates me to get out of bed? What motivates me to get into training? When, we all have those days where we just don't feel it. We don't feel good. We don't want to do something hard or physical. And the biggest thing that I used to tell myself that I can tell you, the biggest thing that motivated me was, what would the average person do? I'm telling you what the average person would do. The average person wouldn't do it. And I didn't want to be the average person. So I got up and I made myself do it no matter how bad I felt. I think one of the worst, I would say there's probably 2 or 3 times that was the worst times in my life that I didn't want to train and was so glad that I did. One was my last year of college. Last year of college was really hard. I was pushing my GPA really high, trying to get into grad school. But I would go work out and I would actually study better. Now, at first, I didn't want to go work out. I didn't want to, what I would consider at that time, waste the hour. But what I noticed was that I calmed down. I got the stressors off. And that's when I started to realize that the days that I didn't feel like I wanted to train, over time became some of my best workouts, and then made the next day so much less stressful and so much better that it became almost like I didn't look forward to the bad days, but I never listened to the bad days. The bad days never changed how I did stuff, because I had had so many continuous good workouts from a bad day that I never listened to how I felt. Case in point, when I would do max effort work, sometimes the best lifts I've ever had in the gym were days I walked in and wanted to go straight home and back to bed. And then as I warmed up and got everything moving and got the blood pumping, my body just shut off and went into overdrive, and it was there. So I think over the last 5 or 10 years, I've never really worried about getting up and having to do something. It always just feels better when I do it. But I think when you first start, you don't notice that that's the case. You listen to your mind or your body tell you that they don't want to do it as far as intrinsically. The key is sometimes you have to block that stuff out and you have to just push through it. And that's a lot of the reason why I created winning warm-ups, was because when I noticed when I did 4 sets of 25 of 3 exercises that were, had some relevance to that day, that it kind of knocked what I consider the rust off physically and emotionally and brought me back to training mode. So as I got older and started messing with more fire departments and police, I noticed that if I got them to do this circuit and got them to loosen up and got them to feel better and kind of got their blood pumping and the endorphins rolling, that I could get them to do so much more on the core lift just based on the fact that we knocked that thing we just talked about out, which is those guys just got done running on patients or taking people to hospital or maybe ran all night on people. They don't want to train, but as soon as I work them through that winning warm-up, it knocks them right out of it and they're ready to work out hard. I find that works really well for everybody else. So that is a huge thing. If you're having that type of you have consistently this type of thought process, or maybe even you give into the thought process where you're like, I don't want to train today, I don't feel like it. Start incorporating winning warm-ups. If you don't know what those are, go on the YouTube channel, but start incorporating winning warm-ups lightly and just knock the rust off and see if you don't have better workouts and if it doesn't make you feel better. But I don't listen to not having a good day or I don't want to be here. All of us go through that. We all do. But I notice that if I just come in on those days when I leave, it's like a breath of fresh air. I've knocked all the stress out, all the endorphins. And for a lot of us with kids and a lot of us with stressful jobs, if you just take that intrinsic motivation and sometimes you block out the bad voices of telling you, I don't go to the gym today, you don't have the energy. Trust me that every time you go in and knock that energy out, and you will feel 10 times better.